Can you talk about how you see active and passive working together and why it's so important to have both?
Yeah, I mean, to me, they have to go hand in hand. And I really believe, what every real estate investor, whether they know it or not, really what they're after is passive income. When I got started in the business, the TV show, you never see a TV show about, hey, I just picked up a rental and I put in a tenant, it's making me $300 a month and I get all these tax benefits.
Right.
It's always, the knocking down the walls, the flip, because that's better for TV. So I think a lot of new investors, we automatically gravitate in that direction, but really passive income in my mind, is the goal. And the only problem is, to acquire more, passive income properties, we need a stream of active income feeding that. So what we tell our students is, flip a property, buy and hold the property, put aside some of the profits on every deal you do just to keep stacking up those houses. So active feeds the passive all day long.
I love it. I love it. Let's give people just an overview of kind of the pros and cons of each, if you wouldn't mind, right? Maybe take two of the pros of the active side, maybe some of the risks that you really need to watch out for that could get you in trouble.
Yeah, 100%. The active side is, whether you're wholesaling a property or rehabbing a property. I mean, if we're wholesaling, we have a goal, of cashing a check in 30 days or less. That's the goal. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. If you're rehabbing a property, average time, hold time right now, 3 to 4 months. So start to finish, worst case scenario, you're cashing a big check. So that is a pro, right? So you have an infusion of capital coming in, fairly quickly. The downside of it is obviously there's risk. You're having to raise money to do these deals, you're having to hire contractors, you're having to, manage the projects and, things along those lines, and, market can shift on you and things like that. And I mean, those in my mind would be the biggest cons to it. And on the passive side, on the passive side, to me, the benefits far outweigh the active side personally. Is, one, you have monthly cash flow. Two, you have just tax benefits, for days. You have, not guaranteed, but, highly likely appreciation, over time. And, the list goes on and on. I guess the downsides on the passive side is if you don't have good property management, then, you could run into some problems there. When I started in between New Haven and Bridgeport, Connecticut. And the first home I ever bought actually was a 3-family in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I'm just like, oh, I'm going to get tenants, I'm going to manage it myself. How hard could it be? And it was a nightmare. And I sold that property and I'm just like, forget this. I'm just flipping houses. And it was years later when I met up with Van Merrill over at Fortune Builders. He was asking how my passive income portfolio, looked. And I'm like, oh, I tried that. I don't do that. I just flip homes. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. And I told him the story. He's like, hey, there's nothing wrong with rentals. He's just like, there's something wrong with you. You just didn't know how to do it. You didn't know how to do it the right way. And now I do. And I always remember those words.
I think we've all had that moment where Fan looks at you and he's such a gentle soul, but he just calls you out and he looks at you and he's just like, dude, what are you doing? You're better than this. You should be missing this key component. Was it one of those looks that he gave you?
Oh, 100%, man. And it's so good to have someone like him, in my life that could call you out on that stuff, because a lot of times, you don't see.
Value of an incredible mentor there. Well, what you're sharing here is, for you and me, it becomes natural. I think for a lot of our audience, the fact it is either active or passive. For a lot of folks that are listening on the podcast, it's one or the other. What would you say to somebody who's only focusing on the active side of the business? Maybe they're killing it. Maybe they're doing great. What would you say to them? Sort of like Fan just said to you when you were killing it on the active side and said, you might want to consider this. How would you do that?
Yeah. So if you're only on the active side, I mean, you're just leaving a lot of money on the table, And, as I said, even with, we teach systems at Fortune Builders, obviously. So even on the active side, you can systematize the business, at a pretty high level to where your day-to-day involvement, is diminished. But again, I mean, once you realize that profit, I don't care if you're flipping 100 homes a year, 200 homes a year. Once you finish that last one, you're starting from ground zero again to find, that next deal. And it's just with the way that we can acquire real estate in this country. I mean, all this, Greg, I'm sure your listeners know, but, debt is the biggest accelerator to create wealth, in my opinion, in this country. And it's unique. I was down in Jamaica not too long ago and I was looking at vacation, but I just looked at a property and they don't finance their homes down there. There's one lender on the island, 17%, 50% loan is it. But yeah, you're absolutely leaving a lot of money on the table. And if you're flipping at a high level, that means you're stacking up a large amount of cash. And right now, like with the current climate in our country, the last thing you want is a lot of cash. I mean, it's just being devalued, more and more on a daily basis. You got to get it out, got to get it to work for you. So that would definitely be my response to that.
Let's dive a little bit more into what an active real estate investor is challenged with, right? You have taught thousands and thousands. I've been to your conferences where you're teaching thousands of people at one time, right? I know how incredible Fortune Builders is and the mastery program is. You guys probably have more actual knowledge of the pain points of an active investor than anybody else in the country. Talk me through, what are the pain points? What are the big challenges that an active investor has? And what are some nuggets that you could give to help those who are going down that path?
100%. Well, it was interesting. We did a survey not too long ago. It was over 100,000 real estate investors across the country, and basically asked them, what is your biggest challenge? Your biggest challenge you're facing in succeeding as a real estate investor. And the number one answer basically was just finding deals. Where there's just their perception was there's not enough motivated sellers out there that will sell their house at a discounted price. And then obviously you hear a lot of chatter about, we're in a very competitive market now. So, when I do find the deal, there's 10 offers on it, I can't get it type of thing. So really finding deals was the number one answer. And then number two was finding money, to do the deals. So it's interesting because, if you got to put a gun to my head and say, Jeff, you could only have a motivated seller or, $1 million cash to go find motivated sellers, which one would you take? And I would take the deal all day long. I don't know about you, because when you find the deal, when you know how to raise the money, the money will come. But that would definitely be, that was the perception. Now, I think there's easy ways to remedy that, through, obviously I'm a big believer in education, and I'm not, you'll hear me say that a lot, on a lot of the questions you ask me. And that's not just because I work for Fortune Builders as a speaker and trainer, but it's because I invested for 4 years, without education. I went bankrupt in 2007. And, 2007 is when I met the guys and I learned how to do this thing the right way. It was funny. I didn't get invited to any podcasts in 2007. I'm not sure why, but, in regards to finding deals, there's, there are so many systems and there's so much technology available to real estate investors where you can literally have motivated seller leads delivered to you on a silver platter, if where to access them. And then raising money. I remember, trying to do my first deal. This was pre-Fortune Builders days. And I was looking to rehab it. And I walked into I think it was a Wells Fargo, and said, hey, I want to rehab this house. I need a couple $100,000. They laughed me out of the bank. I just didn't know. I didn't understand about private lenders and hard money lenders and all these creative way of financing that are available to us. So that's what the average investor says are the two biggest challenges. And I think, through some education, through some systems, they're easily overcome. And then managing contractors is a big one as well. We just had a small group of investors this past weekend. We spent a lot of time talking about that, how CT Homes is doing it, but that could definitely be a big challenge. But again, it goes back to education. It goes back to systems, in my opinion.